Dear ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Hello. At least good afternoon for those who are in the European part of the world. For everybody else, hello and welcome to the ICH GCP Goes Risk-based webinar, which is organized by companies Cyntegrity and PPH. I hope you hear me okay. I hope that the connection is working good so far. We're still awaiting a couple of guests to our webinar. So till that time, I will explain you how everything is working here. So on the right hand side, you can see the chat, which is available for everybody, and please use the chat for asking questions. We are very glad for every question which we can answer. For those questions which we cannot answer, we are glad even more. Then we follow up after this session. So please use it. If you have also some comments about maybe quality of connection, we are helping you during the webinar. So secondly, I'd like to announce that there is an opportunity to request a certificate after the webinar, but you need to actively do this. Not everybody requires certificate. That's why we provide it for those who are requesting the certificate. So how to do this? Please simple request over email, which you got as a reminder to this webinar. So make a response to this email and say that you want a certificate. A named certificate will be provided for you. Again, for those who just arrived, please use the chat for questions, and there is a possibility to request certificate after that. The webinar will be 1 hour in duration, and we will probably answer the questions after this 1 hour. So we will have to do the presentation 1 hour long, and the questions after that will be a bit longer. So if you have to hurry up and you're still interested in answer, please use emails. We will answer over email. And I just want to start very briefly with the history, and I can switch off the camera for now. So the history of this webinar. This webinar is based on the publication, and the publication was made in October 2015, which has the same name, ICH GCP Goes Risk-based. The publication appeared as a dialogue with ICH and industry. And today, by the way, we're also happy to welcome one of the co-authors of this publication, Dr. Beat Widler, who was also a participant of the publication. And I hope that Dr. Widler will provide also comments and questions during the webinar. Today, I'm happy to welcome Dr. María Proupín-Pérez, who is a project leader at PPH Plus. PPH Plus is a CRO with over 15 years of experience, which is located in the central of Europe, in Frankfurt. And Maria was focusing on the clinical trials operations already for a long while. Today she's a co-author or she's participating in a project management group at Applied Clinical Trials as a reviewer and as an author there. She fulfilled her PhD in chemistry in England, and since that time was involved mostly in the operational part of the clinical trials. Today's agenda will consist from two parts. One part will be presented by Dr. María Proupín-Pérez, and this part involves such topics as general mission, goals and trends of the GCP addendum, which appears presumably, or which comes into force presumably in November 2016. Then she concentrates more on sponsor responsibilities. So these are such topics as serial oversight, risk-based approach to quality, to monitoring and the quality management in general. My part will be more dedicated to electronic media, such questions as validation, data collection, and last but not least, investigator responsibilities. At the end, I will present a very brief to-do plan, how to embrace GCP addendum, what you should do already now in order to be prepared to this change in your organizations and in order to embrace this addendum without any complications. And I'm happy to pass the word to Dr. Proupín-Pérez and welcome her in here.
Thank you very much, Artem, for your introduction. I would like to start with a survey. We have a question regarding risk-based monitoring. We would like to know what definition you find better. And this has quite big relevance. So the question is, what is the best definition of risk-based monitoring, in your opinion? Option A is reduction of source data verification by means of centralized monitoring. Option B is monitoring strategy and methods driven by the study risk level. Option C is combine centralized, triggered and targeted monitoring strategies. And option D is I cannot answer yet. So we have these four options. We give you a few seconds to answer them. And the question here is monitoring, risk-based monitoring, overall strategy affecting to quality management from the start, from the planning phase, or is it only affecting one part of quality management, or more than quality management, a tool like source data verification will be? This is the key question here. And let's see the results. So we have here observed that mostly everybody says that it's a combined centralized trigger and targeted monitoring strategy. That is 50% of the audience, of the responders that have said that. Then 40% have chosen monitoring strategy and methods driven by the study risk level. And option D is I cannot answer yet. Interestingly enough, nobody has selected the option A, which will not be false either, but it's not the best response. The best response is, as you correctly have chosen, the 40% of people will be a monitoring strategy and methods driven by the study risk level. However, option Z is correct too, because this strategy is a combination of centralized, trigger, and targeted monitoring strategies. You just need to know how to which is the best combination for each trial.
Maria, sorry for interfering. I must say that this answer is more typical for American point of view. So for FDA, for those who are influenced more by FDA paper, although European point of view, which is based more on EMA reflection paper is more holistic, which is more again option B. There are a couple of discrepancies between these two papers.
Thank you very much, Artem. This is a very important key aspect. I will comment it later on in a slide. I start saying why do we start with ICH? Why does the ICH GCP working group accept risk-based approach right now? Well, the reason for this is that they would like to encourage sponsors to utilize improved and more efficient approaches to clinical trial design, conduct, oversight, recording, and reporting. The reason for this is they want to enhance and make more effective the systems used to ensure subject protection and data integrity. They want to take advantage of the available new technologies and new risk management processes in order to provide a solution to the ever-increasing costs, complexities, and the scale of trials that are now global and comprising many teams delocalized worldwide. So one of the big additions to the ICH GCP is the term quality by design. They want to make use of quality management, including the efficient design of clinical trial protocols. This means they want to build quality directly on the study protocol. And for this, you will need to make sure you have the right data collection tools and procedures, and that the collection of information essential to make decisions about the study design is also the right one. They want to prevent the studies to terminate early, and in the long run it is convenient because you will avoid to go to phase 3 later phase studies that may fail due to the not predictive ultimate effectiveness of the drug due to a bad design on early phases. So let's explain now what is risk-based quality management. Why do we use risk-based quality management now? Well, what you want to avoid is the costs of non-compliance, which means you put in place some quality management systems to avoid pitfalls that will increase costs. But at the same time, you want to avoid non-productive efforts such as 100% source data verification on site when you have, for example, enough centralized monitoring systems in place that will enable to target source data verification, for example. So you want to stay in this area represented in red here in this curve, on the bottom of this curve, of optimal compliance. So the ICH GCP addendum, the draft version still, is now including a new chapter, complete new chapter for quality management description of the risk-based approach. And they define it as a 7-step process where you have first an identification step comprising the identification of critical processes and critical data in first place. What is a critical process? What is critical data? These are data directly affecting patient safety and affecting your primary endpoint. Yeah? This is, and I would say also secondary endpoints, but in first place, primary endpoints. This is critical data. And the critical risk identification will be the second step. What is a critical risk? A critical risk is any threat to the critical processes and data identified in this first step. So in a third step, you have the risk evaluation, and during this risk evaluation you will prioritize risk. You will see what risks are requiring more supervision, and you will prepare the integrated quality and risk management plan and the monitoring plan according to the risk priorities that you observe in this as a result of this evaluation. Then the fourth step is risk control. This is including monitoring. The fifth step is risk communication. This is very important. This is including alerts. How you will alert about a risk that is about to threaten your study. This is very important. And then you have a risk review, which is directly related with the continuous improvement of your quality management system. You need to put in place measures to ensure that you are effectively sorry, you are effectively avoiding risks, and that you are having CAPAs and corrective and preventive actions that effectively avoid recurrence of risks. It might be, and that happens in all the studies, that new risks come. I don't know any study in which no new risk is popping up during the conduct phase. And that's one of the main reasons why risk review is mandatory. Then in the seventh step, you have risk reporting. This is also very important. Now, the ICH GCP addendum is requesting to report not only on-site monitoring activities, but it is literally requesting the reporting of centralized monitoring activities too. So you need to make sure you have put in place the right strategy and communication path to increment to enhance the communication of monitoring activities to the right communication partners. So what does risk evaluation mean? Risk evaluation is analyzing the evaluating how the impact, probability, and detectability of each risk is. It is based on these three attributes inherent to each risk, and as represented in this first row in this table. For example, if you take the risk of giving the wrong IMP dose to a patient, the impact will affect the patient safety and will be high. You should also put yourself in the worst scenario. So you have a high impact. It can be that the patient die if you have a high toxicity, a substance with high toxicity, for example. The probability is related with how likely the risk may occur, and it might be controlled by implementing different designs. For example, if you have a substance that can be used by intravenous formulation or with tablets, if you have tablets sent to the patient at home, you might have a lower control than if you have tablets given in the center, and the same case will be with injections. It's not the same that the patient has to inject himself a substance than if a study nurse is doing it on-site. So detectability is directly related with the likelihood of detecting a problem or issue on for example, in this case with the IMP dose. Again, with the same example, if you have the patient taking and managing the medication himself or herself, it's likely to have more problems. It will be more difficult to detect issues than if it is done on site. What is the difference between probability and detectability? Probability, for example, if you have a device, you have automated a procedure, and you can immediately you can set it up and avoid mistakes due to human causes. Whereas detectability is more related with the ability to reach data. It's with data availability related. For example, if you have paper CRFs, you will have really less detectability as if you use an electronic data capture system. So now, once we have evaluated risk, we need to define thresholds. And the draft addendum to the ICH GCP guideline, now it is requesting detection of deviations from the predefined quality tolerance limits should trigger an evaluation to determine if action is needed. So this is telling you a few things. First, you need to define quality tolerance limits, under control and out of control limits for each risk. Then you need to be able to detect deviations. You need to measure, be able to measure risks. And then you should be able to communicate risks, triggering the required evaluations. And finally, you need to be able to implement the right responses, actions. You may predefine responses to already observe risks that you have, for those risks you have observed before starting your trial. So in this graph, the definition of out and under control risk is represented by these lines on top of this graph and under this graph, upper control limit, lower control limit. And then we have the communication of this. We have to measure the risk. We have to take measures for risk. And we need to be able to define when the alerts are going to be triggered. And that's here represented by these upper warning limits, lower warning limits. But you may wish to set up alerts in a different way. For example, using this 7-rule warning, where you have a series of signals that are all sequential and do not have the expected variability, for example. So whatever you choose to define your alert system, it has to be effective. It has to communicate the risk timely and to be able to implement the correct responses. So now I have another question regarding CROs. We have here the second question. Are the sponsors ready for an efficient CRO oversight? So the responses are: sponsors A, do it now. B, sponsors are somehow ready. C, sponsors are not ready but will be before the release of ICH GCP addendum. And option D, sponsors are not ready. So the question here is, how are sponsors ensuring correct CRO oversight without falling into double efforts and at the same time avoiding negligence? So most of the respondents, 40%, answer that sponsors are not ready but will be before the release of ICH. I find it very important, very relevant that we say that the sponsors are not yet ready, so we need to do something about it. Then 30% of the responders say that sponsors are just not ready, so it's not clear that they will be ready once the ICH GCP addendum is approved. and 30% of the respondents said sponsors are somehow ready. So we see that there is a need to take action to make sure that the sponsors have chosen the most effective approach to ensure that their quality management is really controlling actions that have been delegated to CROs. So now the ICH GCP addendum is requesting the following from sponsors. A sponsor should ensure oversight of any trial-related duties and functions carried out on its behalf, CRO. And also specify in writing any trial-related duty and function that is transferred to and assumed by a CRO. So this is added to the ICH GCP addendum. There is nothing new. This was always the sponsor responsibility, but now it is written and confined in the ICH GCP addendum. So I would like to show you, now that you said that we need to do something, that the sponsors are mainly not ready for these changes, not for these changes, but to effectively control or proceed with oversight of CRO's activities. The EMA has published in 2013 this reflection paper on risk-based quality management in clinical trials, and they provided some mitigation actions to be able to improve CRO oversight. So the first one was that quality management procedures should be established across the organization. You should proceed with trainings and make sure you have established quality management procedure across the organization. I would say within organizations too. So you have to first make sure that you have your own quality management procedures in place in order to be able to improve quality management systems across organizations afterwards. Then contracts, the EMA is considering contracts should have already described the roles and responsibilities and tasks on it. If you want to avoid legal issues, it's better that you define in as much detail as possible all this in your contract, directly in the contract. And then the IT systems will be also in place to enable better oversight as well as to improve the quality management system within and across companies. And quality performance measurements from the external and internal teams should be also in place. You should measure how good everybody is performing, how well everybody is performing. So another addition, important addition of the ICH GCP is the chapter dedicated to non-compliance. It's a very small paragraph, but it's very relevant. Now, they are requesting to conduct a root case analysis. If you find an issue, you should perform a root case analysis. Make sure you find the root cause and you avoid recurrence by implementing appropriate corrective and preventive actions. And of course, you will need to inform regulators of serious breaches as required or applicable by law. This is part of this continuous improvement process, Plan, Do, Check, Act, where you put preventive action, use preventive and corrective actions to avoid recurrence of NEs. So let's go to monitoring. Let's jump to monitoring now. There is now a new description. There's a new definition of added, and that is monitoring plan that didn't exist before. Now the monitoring plan is described as a description of the methods, responsibilities, and requirements for monitoring the trial. So methods, responsibilities, and requirements should be described. And now, very clearly, the ICH GCP is defining centralized monitoring. In the current version, it was only mentioned. Now it's providing a definition. It's not in the first definitions. It's not in the first definitions you will find. It's in the middle of the paragraph dedicated to monitoring, and they say that centralized monitoring is a remote evaluation of ongoing and or cumulative data collected from trial sites in a timely manner. It doesn't matter, they don't distinguish between centralized and off-site monitoring like in USA, like the FDA. Everything is remote, is centralized monitoring. No? Off-site monitoring is centralized monitoring for the ICH GCP group. I would like to comment here that Mrs. Gabriele Schwarz, a member of the ICH GCP group and representative of the regulatory authorities in Germany, has commented that they use the term risk-based approach to monitoring and never risk-based monitoring due to the lack of consensus about the definition of risk-based monitoring. And that was the first question we placed in this webinar. There is no consensus what risk-based monitoring means. It is for the FDA, as Artem commented before, it is more focusing on source data verification. They understand risk-based monitoring as a part of the innovative tools used to reduce source data verification by means of centralized monitoring, whereas for the EMA, it is more, as Artem said, it is more a holistic approach where you check the risk of your trial and you proceed with quality management, all taking in consideration what risk your trial entails. Yeah? So I would like to quickly show you a bit more what the ICH GCP addendum is telling about monitoring. The monitoring plan should describe the monitoring strategy, monitoring responsibilities, monitoring methods to be used and rationale for the use, critical data and processes in which monitoring will be emphasized, and non-routine clinical practice that require additional training. This means if it is not a standard of care, you may need to put more effort to train the personnel on site and also your monitors, and then to make sure you have the policies and procedures in place. Regarding monitoring plan methods, again, they expect you to have the best approach to monitoring. This means a combination of different approaches using centralized on-site monitoring, telephone conference, whatever it is required to mitigate risks and ensure that you keep patient safety and data integrity as protected as possible. So this is a flexibility in added to the monitoring strategy now officially described it in the ICH GCP addendum. You need to choose the best strategy to ensure the validity of the critical data, and the strategy procedures create criteria for determining the timing, frequency, and extent of planned centralized and on-site monitoring activities. So now they also comment on centralized monitoring, and they dedicate quite a long chapter to it, saying that centralized monitoring supplements on-site monitoring via routine data review, continuous routine data review, and then it helps to detect missing data, inconsistent data, unexpected lack of variability, data outliers, protocol deviations, etc., etc., from a remote location. So it is helping you to detect many pitfalls off-site, so it allows you to target on-site monitoring visits on those aspects or on those risks that you cannot control by means of centralized monitoring. So what they say in the ICH GCP addendum, they are saying that there are now statistical analysis and consistency data checks within and across sites, as well as poor site performance quality indicators or risk indicators, I put some examples in this slide, like for example, the number of the scheme failures at one site. If it is much higher than in any other, it might be that you have you are facing a case of fraud, for example, or you have over and under reporting of adverse events. You see that the site is reporting no SAE, or that there's a site that is working poorly. They are selecting the wrong subjects often. So you need to increase the monitoring activities and focus them more in that side than in any other that is working well. Yeah? And so I would like to show in this slide only that RBA and risk-based monitoring combines on-site source document verification of a limited set of critical data elements, or the use of statistical sampling plans. This is not in the ICH GCP addendum, it's just an explanation. You can choose sites depending on how well they are performing statistically. And first of all, you need to check the trial risk level. You should check if your trial is of high risk, for example, a phase 1 or phase 2 study where the safety profile of your substance is unknown. You may need to proceed with 100% source data verification always. Whereas if you have a study, a phase 3 or phase 4 study, I would say, it's the best example, you may reduce source data verification radically. And an example of how centralized monitoring complements on-site monitoring could be tapered monitoring visits. So you have the same, you start with the same visit frequency at all sites, but then you decrease it at those sites where you see there's a low risk that they are performing well. And another example will be tapered source data verification, where you have the same visit frequency at all sites. You visit sites once per month, for example, but then you start with 100% source data verification, and then you reduce it gradually, and in those sites where you see no issues are arising, those sites that are providing good data will not be exposed to such an extent of source data verification. Yeah? And you can combine, of course, both strategies. So in the end, what you're trying to do is to enhance quality, and instead of the quantity of efforts that might be ineffective or unproductive. Saying this, I just would like to show these two references. The first is to the article published with Artem Andrianov and María Proupín-Pérez from Widler and Schumann, related with the ICH GCP Goes Risk-based is the title of this publication, and then a reference to the risk-based monitoring consortium who published in 2015 a kind of guidance documents that is you may find of helpful. And all the further compulsory references to publications from regulatory authorities and some initiatives, worldwide initiatives like the Transaccelerate initiative. And finally, thank you very much for your attention.
Maria, before I continue, I would like to incentivize everybody to ask questions during this session. I have one question in between. Maria, maybe you can go for it. The question is how do you think, where is the linkage between risks and risk indicators? You mentioned risk indicators. But how to select the most appropriate risk indicators for certain risks? Is there any hint in the GCP about it?
There is no guidance on that. That's a good point. You have no guidance on that. However, there are many initiatives helping on that. And one is, for example, Transaccelerate. The RBM consortium has also in the publication said something about it. And The best way, I would say, is to check how did you notice that risk in the past. You may make use of history and experience. Your know-how comes from experience in most of the cases. So, for example, if you notice that the site was performing badly, how have you measured that? How have you detected that? That could be your first hint to know how you could detect it in the future. But still, there are many initiatives showing metrics, already providing metrics, and for example, the Metric Champions Consortium has already published some sequence of metrics, and the Transalerate initiative as well, I would say. They are all making publicly available more Transalerate than the Metric Champion Consortium. You would need to be a member, but Transalerate has openly published a set of risk indicators.
As far as I remember, MCC, so Metrics Champion Consortium, opened certain metrics for trial performances. So there are some metrics that are available for everybody as well, and they could be found on their website. We have one question from Dr. Braun, Warner Braun. Could you please elaborate on how RBN process affect trial budgets for both sites and CROs? Marie, do you want to answer this question?
Yeah, that's a very good question too. It is, first of all, it is not well known now. There are many companies reporting savings, still 20% of savings in budget, in terms of reduced timelines and better quality of data. So you have less effort on data cleaning processes, for example. It is not clear. I will say that in the first study, you may expect to even increase costs by the implementation risk-based monitoring, because you may need to put in place change management takes an effort. And once you implement it, it's like with new technologies. Afterwards, everything will go smoother, and you will find the savings in the long run. So you will avoid time-consuming efforts, for example, in data cleaning efforts, and time-consuming later on efforts in terms of resolving queries and reaction from sites. If you have, for example, an electronic CRF, may go much faster if you have a risk management process system, sorry, risk management system in place as before. You know. So in the first trial may cost more. Later trials will be cost effective. Yeah, that's the point.
Well, I have to really continue with my part of the presentation because I'm making worries about the time. We can definitely discuss a bit more in detail when the time will be over. So I would like to thank Maria for a very interesting overview of the first two major topics. She mentioned that there is a cost. The costs evolve through the time right now, but the ethical standards became stricter. So how to change, how to come with this challenge? So ICH has decided since last 19 years, they decided to really adjust the guidance. And I must say that when guidance change, the whole industry changes its mind. And that's where we are now. That's what the challenge is, to change the mindset. And that's probably this webinar helps to adopt this new mindset a bit as well. But of course, a lot more work have to be done. I would like to start with electronic media. And electronic media was mentioned in GCP addendum from certain standpoints. First of all, these are the computerized systems which are more now a bigger part. Before it wasn't mentioned at all. Now it is really it's appearing in GCP. Of course, now we have a lot of mobile devices everywhere, a lot of computerized systems in every clinical trial. It must be somehow regulated. So that's what ICH makes already. So essential documents are defined in the context of electronic media and trial data systems. So let's go through these three topics in order to understand more in more detail what changes or what changes appeared in this context. First of all, in computerized systems, there is notion of validation appeared and already it's a part of GCP. So validation was, of course, always assumed by every auditor. Now, if there is no, the system is not validated, then you are not GCP compliant anymore. A lot of questions appears with various Excel sheets and with various tiny programs which are used in clinical trials. Should they be validated before? I must answer yes to this question, and a certain quality check must happen always, and a certain standardized process of the validity check is assumed in every trial. So how to do validation, be focused more on accuracy, reliability, consistent intended performance. What else is important? Not to forget about the upgrades from one version to another. So if these upgrades happens, then a certain validation of this upgrade must be also part of the procedure. Essential documents are mentioned in the regard that there should be always a record, and this record must be always possible to be found. So every essential documents which are used in clinical trials must be documented. So must be located in a certain place where it's easy to retrieve. And when a copy is used, then please fulfill the requirements of certified copy. And what certified copy is, I will explain a bit later. Trial data systems must be covered with certain SOPs now. And the SOPs, there is a certain guidance, certain topics which what should be in SOPs. So it's not enough to only describe how the system must be working, but also the setup of the system, installation, how the validation process should be fulfilled. Very important point, data backup and recovery because of certain disasters. How do you guarantee that always the copy of your data is available? So here such topics as data mirroring or some redundancy in data are very important. Change control, how do you document your versions, how you document the upgrades, the patches, backups, and so on and so forth. Security, very important point. This is now maybe more, before it was more mentioned in CFR 21 part 11, now it becomes part of GCP as well. So again, for every trial data system, a training is needed for every who is using this. And the training should be documented. Please do not forget that. Investigator responsibilities are more those responsibilities which should be done really by each investigator, and they again maybe echoes with already what we discussed. So first of all is delegation of tasks. how the delegation of tasks should happen. And here it echoes with the topic of zero oversight. Source documents and trial records. These are the procedures which are again identical with previously discussed important documents or essential documents. So again, the essential documents are appearing here as a topic as well. What delegation of task must fulfill? And before, maybe it was not clear that everybody who is part of a clinical trial should be supervised by somebody who delegates the tasks. And this is now part of GCP. And besides, there must be a qualification guaranteed that this person who is involved in a clinical trial is qualified enough for fulfilling these tasks. So, of course, all these parts must be documented as well. So qualification could be maybe mentioned to your CV, and supervision or delegation of the task could be documented as well. Source documents, there must be always an adequate copy of, or adequate, the investigator should maintain an adequate and accurate source documents of a trial records. And source data must follow so-called ALCOA-C or ALCOA principle set. These are the well-known characteristics of source data, like attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, accurate, complete. So ICH assumes that all other characteristics of source document could be derived from those properties. In order to just again essential documents, these are the requirements which are absolutely identical to sponsor responsibilities. So investigator should maintain the record of location of essential document, and when a copy is used, then a certified copy must be fulfilled. So requirements for a certified copy must be fulfilled. Of course, search and retrieval again must be possible, easy. So do not forget about proper catalogization. What certified copy is? Actually, this is finally defined by ICH. So there is a possibility to maintain, for example, electronic copies of the documents, but the process of creation of this copy must be validated. And this is a process which again assumes that you define the risks, define certain requirements, create a test plan, a validation plan, think how what can go wrong during the creation of the copies. I do remember that, for example, Bayer started initiative recently of creating an electronic copies of all their documents of a clinical trial. But when they were asked if they get rid of the originals, they said no, of course not. We always put the originals in archive, but we work with certified copy and treat it as original. And they needed to do a validation process of their scanning. They created a certain procedures, tested this, and proved this, that it works. How to embrace the new addendum, and what should you do now already in your companies in order to make the transferring to or coming to this new environment without major stress or without any stress. Plan risk-based quality management. So review your quality management already now and see if the risks are part of it already. plan and train monitoring team and project management team for risk-based monitoring. What does it mean, actually? Again, there are some challenges that Maria mentioned, some duality in opinions between FDA and the EMA, but there is a certain basis which maybe could be assumed more from quality by design, how to approach the risk-based monitoring. Just SOPs on monitoring and zero oversight now. Just review these SOPs, and it is not a big deal to do it now before, again, end of the year, and see if there are some gaps inside. Embrace centralized monitoring. If you want, you can do it with your own forces. We suggest to involve more specialists on that, because every centralized monitoring introduces its own risks. If you do it on your own, then there is a chance that you repeat certain mistakes that are already, or pitfalls that are already well known. If you have some need in this topic, we may speak about it later. I can say Cyntegrity suggests electronic approaches to centralized monitoring, and which makes it everything a bit easier. Ensure that the computerized systems are all validated, and this is, I must say, during my experience, it is not always the case. Please review it again and again. Be sure that even tiny programs that you use in a clinical trial went through certain validation process. Ensure zero oversight if you are a sponsor, and consider risk mitigation activities in the budget already now. And this refers more to what Dr. Brown already mentioned. So see that the certain mitigation actions are involved into the budget planning as well. And think about changing the mindset, adapting the new risk-based mindset of the GCP. Be sure that everything is on a solid ground. Involve your team in the decision making. Involve your team into the adjusting the procedures, and then I assume that everything goes smooth in your organizations. And having said that, I must say that there is a last slide, and we are just maybe 1 minute already, like more than planned. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate contacting us over emails or telephone. There are contact details on the slide. These slides will be sent after the presentation within the next 2 days. And everybody who is willing to get a certificate, please request it over email as well. And please, now we have some time for any questions and comments. Please use the chat for that. And I would like to say goodbye to everybody who cannot stay with us for now, and hope to meet you again on our other webinars. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you, Artem, for going through these aspects of the ICH GCP addendum. I just would like to clarify about what you said about the discrepancies between Europe and America again. So we're trying to, I would say, coordinate activities across continents, and somehow we are always achieving to find differences. One of the biggest is risk-based monitoring. We have now the FDA focusing on these source data verification reduction activities, or targeted source data verification as the main definition of risk-based monitoring. And when you go to the EMA, as Mrs. Schwartz explained in a conference, they are scared that the sponsors understand that risk-based monitoring is the solution to save money. That's what they want to avoid. and she clearly said they want to make sure the patient safety and patient integrity of data is not put in danger by neglected quality management systems just due to the reduction of source data verification without any other reason or rationale for adaptation of quality management systems.
Yeah, Maria, you're absolutely right. I wouldn't say that there is a discrepancy between America and Europe. I would say it's more FDA and EMA. But you're absolutely right. EMA was a bit disappointed to see the guidance from FDA before the guidance of EMA, which again a bit more broader. Take a look on this topic. I would like to incentivize everybody to ask questions and provide any comments if you have. Small comment, we will be having a webinar about RBM soon. Please take a look on our websites and follow the newsletters. There will be a more detailed webinar about risk-based monitoring, so which goes in a bit more deeper understanding of this topic. So for now, I don't see too many questions. I would like then to thank everybody for participation. I really appreciate your time. I really think that it's reasonable to invest it now before GCP comes into the force, and start preparing yourself, your colleagues, and your documentation for this regulatory change. Thank you, everybody, and if you have later questions, ask them please over emails.
Again, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and as Artem said, we have a webinar, a risk-based specific webinar on 21st April, just in case somebody is willing to attend or interested. So wishing you all the best and a lot of success in your clinical study projects, and hope to hear from you soon.